Hello, this is Hilary Robertson. Welcome to episode 22 of Harmonious World. This week, I'm joined by classical guitarist Yuri Liberzon, who has a fabulous new album out now, which features three of Johann Sebastian Bach's violin masterpieces, the three violin sonatas, but played on classical guitar. Thank you for joining me. I really appreciate you giving up your time. And I've listened, obviously, to the Bach that you've done on classical guitar.
Of course. Well, thank you so much for doing this. It's my pleasure as well. And well, I started this project. It was over 2 years ago, and it took me about 2 years to record everything. I was always very much influenced by music of Bach, and if you talk to pretty much any classical guitarist, they would tell you that Bach sounds great on guitar, and they love playing Bach on guitar. But these works, I think, are a little bit different. I think they're a little bit less common on guitar because they're originally written for violin. Unlike, for example, his lute suites are much more often played on guitar. Even the cello suites are played more often, but the violin works are kind of a little bit less often, more rare on guitar, and I would say they're very challenging.
They sound it.
They do. Well, I'm not sure if it's a good thing, but
Yes, no, sorry. It's not that they sound like you can't do it, but they're very let's say they're very intricate.
yes, they are. And a little bit of a story. When I first came to the U.S., I studied with this famous guitarist, Manuel Barueco, uh, who turned out to be. The reason why I'm saying turned out to be is because at the time I was pretty young, and I just heard his recording and I was blown away. But I did not know how well known he was, how much of a career he had. I just really liked his playing, and one of the first things I worked on with him was one of the sonatas, the first one, the G minor one, and I was very much influenced by his playing of that piece. So at that time, I was just trying to understand how to phrase his music and how to, some technical things. I did not even come close to thinking of recording it. Maybe one movement at a time or something like that. But at some point I realized, oh, I want to do the whole thing, and it turned into a whole album. So it's just music that means a lot to me. That is emotional, spiritual, challenging, uh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. It's interesting, isn't it, that Bach is technically just brilliant. I mean, just perfect. And yet there's also a musicality and a spirituality behind it and everything.
It's a whole package. Yeah.
Yes. Indeed.
Yeah.
Indeed.
And what's interesting, you can pick any direction, and and there is no limit. If you want to dive into the spiritual aspect of it, there is a lot to learn, to know about his time, his style. But if you want to go to the technical route, I mean that you can make it as challenging as you want. But my personal preference is to kind of go for what the music is asking for, not what I think it should have. It's a,
Okay.
it's a little different. I mean, I don't know if it makes any sense, but I try to kind of have the music reveal itself to me, as opposed to me saying, "Oh, I think I'm going to add more of myself into this." So I try to keep it as pure as possible, even when trying to make it work on guitar, because it's a different instrument. Some things work differently on that because of that. Yeah.
Yeah. I was going to ask you about the sort of the range and the technicality of it, and I mean, because obviously a guitar is plucked and a violin is bowed. So how does that have an impact on how you play?
That's a great question. So even though the guitar, you play a note and it's basically that's the beginning of the end of the note, right?
Yes.
It starts to die right away. So the way I think about it is I try to imagine as if the note was sustained, and that actually makes a lot of difference in how I shape the notes, how I choose the volume, the dynamics, the timing, the rubatos. Because if I did not think that way, I would probably just give up on the note and think, okay, well, I just played it's dead. Let me
Right.
focus on the other voice right now. But no, I try to keep in mind all the voices as they continue ringing, or as they are decaying. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, it's kind of unrelated to your question a little bit, but some people interpret Bach as very technical and dry interpretation. I don't think of it that way. I think it has everything for me. I do think, especially the slow movements, are very expressive and kind of like a fantasy, especially his slow movements in the violin sonatas. So they take you different places, and uh, it's, I
Yes.
don't know, it's
Yeah.
it's kind of like life.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I think there's a reason Bach has stayed around and stayed valid all this time. There's something very special about his compositions.
Absolutely, and I feel it's an honor for me to be able to touch on these things. And by no means um, I can say that yeah I know how it needs to sound, or anybody should not be able to say that. But just to be able to play it and have your own take on it, that's I feel it's an honor in someone's lifetime.
Yeah. Tell me about the Butterfly Church, and also where is Pacific Grove in California? Give me some
Of course.
idea of where it is.
It's funny. I was just there yesterday.
Oh,
It's about an hour and a half, maybe close to 2 hours drive from where I'm located, um, and it is a little bit north from the Bay Area. So the Bay Area is where all the tech companies are,
yes.
um, and there are a couple small towns that have lots of art galleries and a couple very nice downtowns, shops, and they also have it's right on the beach on the ocean. The story was that I was looking for a space to record, which there's another story that was before it. During my search for a place to record, I found a cemetery that
Okay.
had a chapel, beautifully sounding chapel. But the problem with that place was that when I started recording there, there was a noise, and it turned out to be that they were actually cremating people. It was the most unexpected thing that happened.
Wow.
So yeah, I decided no, that's not gonna work, and I kept looking for another place, and I started making phone calls to different churches around here, and someone recommended this butterfly church, and the lady who worked over there, I think she's their music director. She's somehow related to organizing music events over there. So she said, "Yeah, anytime you want to come, I'll give you the keys.
Wow.
It's yours." So I asked my engineer if he would come and join me, and we spent 2 days at a time, three times. So each sonata where we spent 2 days recording, and we had a place to stay, and basically started recording after maybe after 8 o'clock until 1 or 2 a.m. or until I was exhausted, or
Yes.
and it was really a great experience. It was quiet. It had to be quiet because of the traffic outside. There
Oh,
was
of course.
rain as well, So that's basically the experience with the church.
And when were they recorded?
Um, yeah, I have the exact dates on the album, inside the album. I can look them up for you. Over the course of 2 years.
Okay, right, yeah, okay, that's good enough.
Yeah.
So it's over the course of 2 years, and so why release them now? Is it just taken that length of time to kind of mix and master and get
It
it
really
right?
took a long time because I was working with the end of 2 years was the summer. So what
Okay,
I'm saying, yeah. So it took 2 years. Yeah, but the reason why I released now is because everything came together, because I had to have the design finished, the mastering, the all the edits, everything. Uh, it turned out to be a very involved project, trying to fine tune the sound as well.
I mean, you get the sound that you like in the church itself, but then you've got to convey that digitally, whether that's on on a CD or you know.
And back in the day, the artist did not have to worry about those things. These days,
No,
it, pretty much you worry about everything. You
yeah,
have control of everything, which is good and bad. Yeah.
exactly. So, how has your how has lockdown been for you?
In terms of performing, it's been terrible
Yeah,
for everybody, and I lately I'm just sensing from other artists that there's a little bit of pessimism, I guess, happening um, because there's no end in sight. I mean, there's hopefully there's a vaccine, but nobody really knows how quickly or how long it will take. But for me, I mean, I have done a few live stream concerts, and I was able to keep all my students, so I teach them remotely, mostly remotely. I still have my studio where I teach them, a few students, regular, so I know they're safe.
yeah,
Um, but yeah, it's been interesting. It's been definitely different that I cannot
yes.
drive anywhere to perform or to fly somewhere. I don't know. I think it hits hardly people like myself. I'm hardest, sorry. Um, but I'm lucky that I have my students. But for someone who is purely relying on performing, I don't know how they're surviving.
No, that's right. And I think obviously I've spoken to several musicians, composers, conductors, performers, and they've all had different experiences. And some performers have managed to get quite a lot of live streaming in. Uh, some have managed to get. I'm not entirely sure. I think in the States you've simply stopped all performance, haven't you? I mean, there's been nothing. Whereas here we in the summer there was some kind of wiggle room in terms of outdoor, not exactly festivals, but where people were starting to do things, especially actually on in continental Europe. A lot of people were doing bits and pieces of stuff in, they were going to France and doing 3 shows and that sort of thing. And there were a few things, but obviously we've gone back into lockdown, so there's nothing now. And for some composers and songwriters, it's been quite interesting because they've actually, for some of them, they've found it a useful time to sort of reconnect with the craft, because they're not having to go around and tour everything. They can literally just stay until something's finished. So it's interesting how it has a different effect on different people.
Absolutely. I've talked to my former teacher, and he said he actually is enjoying it because he's been traveling the world for like 40 years, and now he finally gets to enjoy his practice at home.
Yes. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
it's different for everybody.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
but I think long term, I don't know. I would I would rather it go back to normal.
Yes,
Yeah.
indeed. We've had some, obviously there's been the recent talk of the vaccines, and it's starting to feel as if that might be a window, but it's not going to be until at least the spring, if not the summer next year. So, you know.
Is everything also on lockdown in?
Yes. So
Where are you located?
I'm about 30 miles north of London in Hertfordshire, and we've been in lockdown for 3 weeks. We've got another week to go with complete national lockdown again, the same as it was in March, although slightly different. There's more sort of takeaway food going open, and some more sort of hardware shops and that sort of thing that are open, but not very much, and certainly no meeting people for coffee or that sort of thing, which is, I thrive on that. But we come out of that next Wednesday, so we'll have to see how that develops. But in none of that conversation have I seen anything about concerts.
I think it's last on priority list.
Yeah. So anyway, we shall see what happens with coming out of lockdown and the vaccine and touring again. And have you got? Is there a particular project that you would particularly like? I mean, is it this? Would you tour this album? Would you like to do that?
That's a great question. I would absolutely, but you probably know Hilary, the famous violinist.
Oh yes.
She toured with the Bach works as well. I think I'm not sure if she played all sonatas or partitas. I think she played everything, but in like two parts of the concert. I'm not sure. Maybe just sonatas or maybe just partitas, because it's very long. It's just 1 hour for just the sonatas. I think it'll be very interesting to do something like that. I mean, some people think, oh wow, it's an hour of Bach's music, but I think it's so great that it can keep someone engaged.
Well, the movements are also different, aren't they?
They alternate.
Yeah. So it would be beautiful. It would be lovely. I can imagine that being quite intense as a performer.
Absolutely, and it kind of got me when you asked me that question. I was a little worried. That's a lot of. Well, I have to say that my approach to recording and performing is slightly different. I think when I approach recording, I think more of capturing the best possible interpretation or best possible performance of it. But for performing, I think it needs an element of spontaneity. And I don't think it's the same as the recording. The recording can be polished and refined, but the performance needs to have that taking risks.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I'm a massive jazz fan. Jazz is my kind of thing. And I love the fact that you could go and see the same artist 40 times and you would never get the same gig ever, not even the same.
Honestly, even if I play it at home twice, it's never going to be the same.
No. And I think that would be stunning. It would be amazing. And surely that is the difference, isn't it? That I can put the CD on and I can play it and I can hear exactly the same thing and get more out of it, hear the different things that I can perhaps hear each iteration. Whereas live, it's just that one and then it's gone. And that's lovely.
And speaking of jazz, I think Bach was a jazz musician of his time.
I agree. Yeah.
Because all these works are basically improvisations.
Yes.
I'm a big fan of Keith Jarrett.
Oh, right.
And I played actually one of his pieces. And it's kind of similar feeling that I'm having when I play Bach. Yeah.
I think with both composers, there's that intensity, there's the technical skill, and it's that I think it's the same as with Shakespeare, that there's a technicality and a technical wizardry, and yet there's also this massive creativity and spirituality as well.
Well, I came to realize that for great things to happen, you need to have constraints. So, set of rules, that within those rules you can be creative. And I think Bach's music is very much like that. Like, for example, um, it's limited to a key, or of course it can go to another key, but um, it's not just like here's what white sheet of paper and do whatever you want. It's not like that.
No, that's right. Yeah,
Mm.
yeah, very good.
But I'm not a
Yeah.
jazz musician, but I'm assuming it's a little similar there as well.
I have a foot in both camps, and I love jazz and I love classical, and I think it's the control of both that's very different. I love I'm a saxophone player, and I love on the rare occasions when I get to play in an orchestra. That's so, you can't step out of line at all, even in terms of dynamics, because if you do, you're going to stick out a mile, especially as a saxophone player.
Mhm.
And yet there's something liberating about that, which is great.
Well, the comments I hear about classical music is, so what do you do? Where's the creative part? Because you're giving the notes, you're giving directions of how to play them. So where is the creativity in all this? And it's really actually difficult to explain. It's in between the notes because you cannot play the same note twice, even the same way. And the directions that you're given are so few compared to how many you have to make.
Yeah,
Yeah, there are other dimensions of decisions that are not even considered.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. I mean, uh, every musical instrument has its own nuances that, in fact, you can't write it down. There are ways of getting a note from each instrument that isn't it's not possible to dictate well, it would be possible to dictate it, but you'd be writing an essay for each bar. you know
Yeah, well, it's very difficult to. I'm quite against using words to describe music, but unfortunately, there's not many other tools we can use.
no.
So what I'm trying to say is words are more limiting in describing music because music carries so much information.
Yeah,
Um,
but that's why I love doing this. I love having this podcast because it forces you to verbalize your skill as a musician, and I quite like that. I quite like the sometimes the discomfort that I can sense. But actually, you have to be able to rationalize certain bits of it because the rest of it you can't possibly rationalize. So let's not even try and rationalize the real stuff. We can just rationalize the bits that we can.
Absolutely, and I try to rationalize as much as I can because that gives me control. That means
Yeah,
I can alter it ways in different ways rather than just write it off as magic.
yeah,
And
definitely.
that's how you get better. That's how what I learned. The more control or understanding you have of something, the more you can morph it into your what you
Yeah,
want.
yeah, yeah. Fantastic. Well, thank you so much, Yuri. It was really nice to talk to you.
Thank you so much. It was really great. Thank you so much.
Brilliant. Okay, well, enjoy the rest of your day, and I hope the album goes well. And I'm going to encourage, obviously, my listeners to listen to it because it's such a beautiful collection of pieces. So, thank you.
Thank you so much, and best wishes. And I hope we're gonna come out of this better.
Exactly. All right. Lovely.
Take care.
Thanks, Yuri.
Yeah.
Okay, bye. Well, that was a very interesting conversation with Yuri. I hope you enjoyed it. Thank you for joining me once more on Harmonious World. Please leave a review wherever you found this podcast, whether that's on Buzzsprout or Spotify or Amazon or Apple Music or wherever. And let me know what you've enjoyed listening to. And I look forward to you joining me again next time. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of Harmonious World. My name is Hilary Seabrook, and it's a great delight to bring this series of discussions with musicians and composers and writers and all sorts of people to you. Obviously, there's no point in having a podcast if people aren't listening, and I'm very grateful to my listeners for doing so. Thanks also to Joe English for composing and performing this new theme tune. So wherever you get your podcast, you can leave a review. You can share this with your friends and family, either as a link or on social media and that sort of thing. I'd be really grateful for that. Don't forget that you can subscribe now. There's a link wherever you get your podcasts. So have a great week, and please remember why I started this, which is just to try and make the world a little more harmonious. Thanks for listening to Harmonious World.